Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining me for an edition of Favorite Albums of 2024. Um, these are always so subjective, they're always so difficult to do. Sometimes I get sort of tripped up and like, are these the best albums of 2024? Or are these my favorite albums of 2024? And I try to be, I think, as personally subjective as possible. So, what I've decided to do is go for more my personal favorite albums of 2024 that I heard a lot in the store, or maybe I heard outside the store. In many cases, they're things that maybe didn't sell a lot, or they were things that resonated with me that I was like pretty interested in, and maybe not everybody else is going to like them, or nobody at all. I don't know. But I think my goal with selling music, as long as I have, at least a lot of it, has been to kind of help facilitate bringing things to people. Not necessarily being a curator, although there is that element of it to an extent, but I do like sharing what I love with other people, and whether or not they love it the same or love it at all is up to them, but at least they've been sort of exposed to those things. And same way I expect all of you to share your likes with me. Our lists are going to have differences. That's just the way we are. Humans are very subjective that way, and I can respect all of those lists, and I'm very interested. So when this video goes up and you're on your typing capability or whatever, send down whatever your top 5 or 10 are for the year. I'd be interested to read them. And there are a lot of records that I really enjoyed that didn't end up necessarily being in this list. So, what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you my top 20 of the year plus one, because I just couldn't leave it out. And then I'll go through a bunch of honorable mentions and tell you why they're honorable mentions. So, I don't want this video to be as long as some of those in the past have been, where they go on for an hour. So let me just kind of start here, and before you get bored with my introduction. All right, so my plus one was a new release from a new band that came out early this year, and that is The Last Dinner Party, number 21, with Prelude to Ecstasy. This record is kind of the zone where Florence and the Machine sort of sits, I think, but maybe a little more sort of, you get the feeling that there's a real group of 5 band members here at work together, as opposed to Florence, which is her who kind of just embodies the group, and then other people that sort of are collaborative and whatever. Although the Machine is technically a band, I suppose. But anyway, but they're more sort of shifting characters. Hard to say with this anyway, because it is their debut. But what a strong debut from this British group of women. I just love their aesthetic. It was perfect for a year when like Saltburn was sort of on everyone's minds as a movie over the summer. So kind of Baroque pop, really. Those of you who know me know that my likes tend to run very British and very art rock and synth and pop and that kind of stuff. So you're going to hear a lot of that kind of stuff. But Last Dinner Party, number 21. Number 20. Very strong record from these guys. I think each record for me keeps getting stronger and stronger. That is Fontaine's DC with Romance. Well, I love the track with all of the breathing. The if you've heard the song, this is Starburster, is great. They kind of they're Irish, I believe, and they're just becoming a great stadium rock band, along the lines of the big stadium rock bands of the past that have really kind of gone to different levels from Europe in America. It's hard to break America, I think, as a British or European band. People like Oasis have done it. Even bands like The Cure, Depeche Mode. And there's a certain amount of Cure-ish, Depeche Mode-ish angst in this music. It's a little more organic than Depeche Mode because it's less synthy. But it does have, I think this album for me, I really liked it because it had more textures to it than their others, a little less monotone. But some people said, "Oh, Skinty Fia, the last one, they liked more." So, you know, everybody has a different feeling about it. But I really thought Romance was a very strong album, and I love this album cover. It's one of my favorite album covers of the year. It's just oddly bizarre, but in a great way. So that's number 20. Number 19, Dive, Frog in Boiling Water. So Dive is a shoegaze band. If they get pegged as anything, and this is, I believe, their fourth or fifth album. I felt like it seemed like they were kind of more focused on this record. The last one that they did was a little more sort of mainstream rock after they'd kind of, the lead singer had a lot of like personal problems, substance abuse problems, etc., well publicized issues. And I think it was the sound of them kind of getting themselves together and being a little more aggressive. This album, I think they seemed a little more comfortable with who they're becoming and their sound and all. And it's sort of dark, sort of little sort of that shoegaze thing, which has become very popular again with bands like Slowdive still carrying on, My Bloody Valentine, and we've got a whole new crop of them coming up now. So, but Dive has been around for a little while. This, like I said, this is like their fourth or fifth album at least. But I highly recommend that one if you're into that sort of thing. And then number 18, Future Islands with their most recent album. I'm trying to remember the name of this. Excuse me. It's People Who Aren't There Anymore. And so this album was sort of their divorce album. Two of the band members were going through divorces at the time, and the lyrics sort of reflect that. It's interesting how their last record was very all about sort of like the road and touring and the love of the audience. And you see that maybe loving your audience and touring so much might not have been such a great thing when it was also destroying your personal relationships because you weren't together as much as maybe you wanted to be. But that was a tough time coming out of the pandemic and all. So, but this is a very kind of heartfelt album. Sam has some really, I think, some of his best vocals he's done. He's got a very gruff voice. It's very ragged and rough sounding, and it's a sort of low baritone bass kind of voice against this very clean synth poppy background. They're from Baltimore, came out of that sort of scene that, like, you know, Beach House and people like that were from. But I think, you know, the music is getting more sort of, what do I want to say, layered all the time. I think it's always getting more thoughtful in its arrangement. And I think his vocals still are sort of a juxtaposition to the music. A few years ago, their album Singles, I believe, was, if it wasn't my album of the year, it was near the top of the list. And they've had a couple albums since then that have been good, but this is the first time I think they're sort of back at that level. So this is number 18, Future Islands. Number 17, a band that's been around for, gosh, almost 40 years now, and they just keep quietly making records. And many people, maybe they don't even know that these are out, but this is the new Underworld album, and it's called Strawberry Hotel. Underworld, in the 80s, let's try and make this brief. In the mid 80s, they were a band called Freur, with a song called Doot Doot that had very little play on MTV. Didn't really go anywhere. Changed their name to Underworld. Became more of an In Excess-y type band, and did like 3 albums, I believe, for Warner Brothers, all of which did not sell very well in the US. and they basically scrapped their whole idea and felt like they needed a rethink. And smart that they are, lead singer Carl Hyde and Rick Emerson. They got with was it Rick Emerson? I think one of the guys was a DJ. They brought in a DJ. Maybe it was Rick Emerson. It's been a long time. And in the mid '90s, they released early '90s an album called Dub No Bass with My Head Man. And basically, it was very long, kind of atmospheric tracks. I'm talking 7 to 10 minutes. Some were instrumentals, but most had vocals on them, but they weren't typical songs. They're sort of stream of consciousness, lyricism kind of stuff. And they've kept that sort of working ethos ever since. Their music has been used in a lot of films. They were the soundtrack for a rave generation in the '90s. You'd go to see them and expect to hear lots of banging beats and flashing lights, but there was also a lot of texture to their music, more so than probably almost any other. They certainly weren't the Prodigy. I mean, the Prodigy were much more sort of directly aggressive at some point. Underworld always much more kind of moody, dark, and like more sort of all about the peaks and the valleys and the way they build in and out of stuff. Not necessarily any songs or song structure, although there is structure. But this album is very interesting. A few years ago, they did a project where they did a different song every week for a year and released that in a little box set, and then also they put out like a small compendium of that. And this is really the first thing I know of that they've released since that was sort of an official album. But this also, I think, shows a little more interest in vocals. Like the first track is a lot of just a cappella vocals from Carl. They bring in vocalists, the daughters of the two guys who are now in their, I think they must be mid 60s. Their daughters come in and do like sort of quirky ambient like vocalizations, and so it's kind of more of an art rock type project. They always sort of have been, but if you've lost track of Underworld, they're still making records, and Strawberry Hotel is really good. The vinyl keeps getting pushed back. I think it's now like mid or late January, but the CD's been out since October. So it's worth a stream if you haven't heard it. It's, again, not for everybody. A lot of people remember them with their Lager Lager song from Train Spotting. It was used in that film. That was like their big sort of commercial, I suppose, if they had anything sort of like that in the US. Number 16, I don't have a visual for it, unfortunately, because it's an album I keep meaning to actually buy, and it always sells in the store before I can buy it. So I'm like, I let the customers have it first, and then I was like, well, I'll just put a CD in the video, and then someone bought the CD too. So number 16 is the new Magdalena Bay album, Imaginal Disc. And they're a duo, electropop, but they're a couple, male female singer, but they do have a very kind of synth pop meets progressive rock feel about them. Like their songs are very poppy and synthy and catchy, and she's got a great voice. It's very girly, but then the songs go into like very odd territory. Sometimes they have wig outs, or they'll go like 6 or 7 minutes or something like that. So Imaginal Disc by Magdalena Bay is number 16. Loved their last album, Mercurial World. So yeah, check that out if you have it. All right, number 15, Elbow. The return of Elbow and Audio Vertigo. I find it interesting. I've seen this on a couple of lists, but not too many. And I think this album was really under the radar for a lot of people this year because Elbow have made so many records. This is probably their 12th or 13th album, somewhere in there. And they've had a lot of very well-known albums. Seldom Seen Kid won the Mercury Prize back in like the mid 2000s. But this album, to me, they had the last few records have all been fairly mellow. And the last one sort of had these bursts of energy, and I thought, ooh, Elbow's sort of tapping into something different here. And this album goes really far with it. They brought in a horn section. It's much more sort of like aggressive, has a beat. Still pretty conventionally Elbow sounding. Guy Garvey's voice is what it is. It's very kind of husky and gruff, but soulful, and he's got a beautiful voice. Very, if you like Peter Gabriel, you need to hear Elbow because his voice is about as close to Peter Gabriel. Usually, people sort of confuse it for being Peter Gabriel, but it's a very upbeat record for them. They don't necessarily have electric guitar in the forefront a lot because there's so much going on in the bass and the drums and kind of the keyboards in the band. But I think this is their best record in a while, and I've really enjoyed the last couple too. So check out Elbow Audio Vertigo, number 15 for me. Number 14. It's been a while. And again, an album that I think sort of flew under the radar for some people. Unfortunately, I missed them when they were in town, but Camera Obscura, with their new album, Look to the East, Look to the West. This is kind of a heartfelt record. If you sort of like people like Bell and Sebastian, I believe they're from the same general area of Scotland, and they sort of had a problem. A problem. It's been over a decade, I think, 12 years. I can't remember. It's been a long time since their last record came out. Their keyboard player and one of the sort of de facto leaders of the band had cancer and passed away. And it was just heartbreaking for the members of the band. I think they couldn't really carry on for a while. Her name was Carrie. And so there's actually a song on here, I believe, I think it's Sugar Almond, that ends with the name. She just says, sings the name Carrie. It's one of the most beautiful. There's just beautiful songs on here. Very sad and heartfelt, but dedicated songs to her. And then there's catchy songs like Pop Goes Pop, things like Liberty Print. I mean, I think this album sort of harkens back to, if you remember the "Hey Lloyd, I'm going to be heartbroken," the song that they wrote for Lloyd Cole back in like the early 2000s. This is about as close to that as they've gotten sound wise. Again, they brought back the same producer who worked on that, which I believe was, I can't remember. Oh, it's Jori Halplainen. I can never say his name. He's like a Norwegian or Scandinavian guy. But anyway, it's a great album. If you like singer-songwriter stuff, if you like Bell and Sebastian kind of stuff, there's a song called Baby Huey, which if you're into like soul music and you know who Baby Huey is, that's kind of interesting too. But anyway, I recommend this record. So Camera Obscura, Look to the East, Look to the West. Number 13. A record sort of came out of nowhere for me. Again, she hasn't had an album for like 6 years, I think. It's Jessica Pratt, and her new album is called Here in the Pitch. Now, Jessica is another quirky. I just love the quirky singer-songwriters, quirky voices. I feel like there's so much generic stuff on the radio as far as like the voices and everything. I mean, yeah, I suppose I understand why people like, Dua Lipa are really popular, I suppose, but I really want to hear something a little more that stands out for me. Jessica's voice, this whole album is only like 30 minutes long. I'm not even sure if it's that long, and it took her 6 years to make it. It kind of fits into that David Lynchy realm of like the Julie Cruz type vocals, very throwback to like the 50s. There's a lot of reverb and sort of like weird sort of old kind of like throwback guitar, like 50s sounds. but it's kind of a quiet record. It doesn't ever really rock out or anything like that. But her voice can be very much an acquired taste, because it's so affected and quirky, but I think it's actually like her voice. Like, I don't think that she's trying to manipulate it necessarily to sound like that. It just is that. But anyway, a very unique singer songwriter, and I think she's on a lot of people's list probably this year as like a very highly critically acclaimed. It's, again, just not for everybody, but give it a shot. That's number 13. Jessica Pratt. Number 12. Talking about quirky singers and songwriters. Arrou Aftab. I think that's how you say her name. Night Rain is her album. Arrou was nominated for Best New Artist at the Grammys about 4-5 years ago. Maybe not quite that long even. I want to say she's like Iranian American, or just maybe she's just Iranian, or she's some sort of Middle East. I don't. That's just terrible that I'm not exactly like, oh yes, I know exactly where she's from. I don't want to put her in the wrong country or anything like that. So forgive me if I put her in the wrong place. But someone out there is going to know. They're going to be able to stop this video and Google it. But anyway, what a fantastic voice. And she kind of gets grouped in with like jazz singers. And she does have that jazzy quality to her voice. It's very low, not super low, but low, very clear, not husky, not raspy, very clean, but soothing, very soothing. And the music is also kind of acoustic jazz with sort of a folkiness to it. She does one cover song on here in English. It's her version of Autumn Leaves. I think maybe there's one other song too in English. Last Night, maybe. And then, or maybe it's Whiskey. And then the rest of it is in whatever language, Urdu, I don't know, some Arabic language. But I don't even care what language it's in. She just sounds beautiful. It's the kind of vocalist that like, it's the reason that I sort of get drawn to people like Elizabeth Fraser of Cocko Twins, and I don't even really necessarily care what they're singing about unless it's something that's like talking about maiming somebody or something like that. And then I really don't want to hear it. But it's her stuff is very soothing and calming, and I find myself, maybe it's an age thing, but I do find myself kind of wanting to hear more from people who are A, not trying too hard to impress me, and B, seem not only real, but are trying to kind of like take down the kind of stress of the day all the time. We're on such a rat race. There's so much going on in the world. I kind of like to clear my thoughts, and that sort of does it for me. Now, some people, it probably is too non-structured. There's not enough like definite melody where you go, oh, I can sing the tune. That's kind of like, some people just don't want to go that far with it. So that she's very unique. So Arrou Aftab. My number 11. Well, this is one of my favorite groups of all time. People who know me know that. They've been around for 40 years. I didn't really know where to necessarily put their album at first. And I'm like, this is a strong album. I don't know if it's a top 10 for me, but I thought it was a very good album. And the fact that they're, 4 decades in and they're still making records this strong. Pet Shop Boys and Nonetheless. And Neil Tennant, I still think, is one of the most interesting songwriters of his generation. I mean, he was a rock music critic at first. Wrote for a newspaper, or NME, I can't remember, one of those British ones, Melody Maker, I can't remember. And then I think it was NME, and then became a musician. Sort of always had been a musician, but actually got a record deal, and then he and Chris Lowe formed this duo. They formed the duo and then they got the record deal. Anyway, this features the song Loneliness, which I think is a really beautiful modern sort of pop synth pop kind of song. It's just describing the kind of things that he writes about that are topics on this record. Feel is about like loving somebody who's in prison and sort of waiting for them to get out, hoping that like today's the day that they're gonna get like they're going to pick them up at the prison to be like, oh, they're getting out of prison. New London Boy is a song that's very autobiographical about Neil when he was younger and going to London and what it was like being in his situation, a young gay man trying to like make his way in the London scene. New Dancing Star was about Rudolf Nureyev, the ballet dancer. The Schlager Hit Parade is a song about basically turning your backs on bad things happening in politics, referencing Germany and sort of how they have this like polka-ish pop type tune thing scene going on in Europe, and how it's like bad things are happening, and yet we're still like singing these like trite songs or whatever. And Bullet for Narcissus, a song about literally without naming the name. It's a song about Donald Trump getting shot and what the security guards who put their lives on the line for somebody like that, what they must go through. And that this came out 6 months, 5 months before that first assassination attempt. 4 months. Anyway, so it's not. I mean, it's not like I guess that couldn't have been predicted as much incendiary stuff as he says, but they predicted it sort of here. So, but and then it ends with "Love Is the Law," which is I think that's another song about. It has something to do with more historical stuff, and I have to reference that to look up what that is. Um, yeah, it's I have so much music on the brain right now, but I definitely it's a beautiful sad song, kind of to end the record. Anyway, Pet Shop Boys, number 11. Nonetheless, it's been a long day. I've been going for like 12 hours. Give me a break. All right, top 10. Woohoo! Oh, I'm 27 minutes in. All right, this will go faster. Number 10, Wild God, Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds. The return of rock Nick Cave, I believe. There were hints of it on his last record, Carnage, the one he did with Warren Ellis. This one is a little bit more full on, and it's upbeat at times. Songs like Frogs, Wild God, Joy. There's a little more like we got to let the light in and move past. I mean, the death of his son was so tragic. And he actually lost two sons, one that he wasn't as close to, but he went through a lot. And so I think that he was just trying to seek the other side. And it does end with songs like oh wow, how wonderful she is, which features some spoken word vocals from Anita Lane, who was an old collaborator of his, ex-girlfriend who also passed away. But there's definitely much more light on this album than he'd been doing on the last few. Drums, lots of rhythm, lots of fiery gospel vocals, horns. And I think it's definitely like the return of the Nick that most people sort of like. So, and I thought Frogs was a really great song. So that's my number 10. Number 9, this record sort of came out of nowhere for me, and this happens sometimes. And so last year, I kind of ignored their first record. I don't know why. It's actually a really good record. This one I like even more, and it's something that maybe a lot of people don't know. So it's The Wave, or Wave, and it's called City Lights. This is actually Graham Coxon from Blur and Rose Eleanor Dougal, who used to be in a band called the Pipettes for a really brief moment, but she's got a few solo records. They actually became a romantic couple at some point and have a child now. I did not know any of this. And I thought, well, let me just check out their new record because I haven't really listened to the first one enough to kind of like have it hit me. And that one came out just last year. So here we are a year later. I don't know if these were all from the same sessions or whatever, but I really like this album. Graham's voice, he's kind of like a Bowie-esque crooner, and his guitar playing and arrangements. If you like Bowie around Scary Monsters era, kinda, there is a lot of that on this record. Also, her voice is very low, but it's very it's very kind of non vibrato, but it's a very pleasant kind of voice. And so she sings lead on like half the songs, and he sings lead sometimes. Sometimes they go into things like old British folk kind of music, folk rock, like things that are more like along the Fairport Convention line or something like that. But it's a very glam rock album for the most part and very kind of Bowie esque. So if you like that, I mean, his voice is not on the level of Bowie. I mean, let's be real. There's only like one David Bowie, but he does have that kind of quality to it. And his guitar lines, if you're familiar with Blur, because I do hear a lot of Blur in this as well, especially like things like the kind of angular, like the Girls and Boys era kind of angular. I'm not playing like typical chord kind of things here. And then he gets on the saxophone and starts blowing that like Bowie would too. Very skronky sax parts and whatever. I think this is a really strong record, and it's only their second one. So I hope that they continue doing this because very pleasantly surprised. And it's probably the first thing since since maybe Good, the Bad, and the Queen, or that I've heard outside of Gorillaz, since Blur has sort of like broken up and now they're kind of back together off and on. But I think this is really very interesting. So now it's maybe other people don't like it as much, but City Lights is a great song. Listen to, if you want to take a chance on something interesting, Durantia. I think that song is like 7 or 8 minutes long, and it's got elements of krautrock. It's very psychedelic, but it's also kind of like trancy, glammy. I don't know. I really like it. It's kind of one of those records that like melds a lot of different styles. So number nine, The Weave, City Lights. Number eight, came out of nowhere for me also. I was not expecting to like this as much as I did. Father John Misty's Mahash Mashana. This just came out like in the last 3-4 weeks, maybe. I've always liked his stuff. Pure Comedy was a great album. I Love You, Honey Bear. I love that record. The last one I thought was very kind of mellow and almost too safe. Had a couple really good songs on it. This one, I think he does better with the songwriting, and I think the arrangements are more interesting. There's only 8 songs, but like the first track is 10 minutes long. I think I mentioned recently in my past video, comparing it a little to Beck's Sea Change at times. The song I was thinking of was Josh Tillman in The Accidental Dose. His name is Josh Tillman. So kind of sing about himself. But that song is a very kind of Sea Change, or Nick Drake's, not Brighter Later, but 5 Leaves Left kind of sound to it. Mental Health is just, I think Mental Health is one of the songs of the year. And Screamland is also a really great song. It sort of tests your speakers and how much they can handle if you really turn it up. And of course, I guess Time just makes fools of us all. Couldn't have said it better myself. And that's one of those throwback songs that just makes you feel great when you hear it, because it's like, how does somebody still write songs that are so like 70s vibe, but really like feel very organic and fresh in a way? And I mean, he was the drummer in Fleet Foxes, right? But another great record from Father John Misty. Don't stop making them, Josh. I know you keep threatening him, or it's like he's threatening to get rid of that character. But character number 7, for me, the Lemon Twigs and A Dream Is All We Know. These brothers from Long Island keep getting better and better with each album, and the last one was very Simon and Garfunkel esque. This one is very Todd Rundgren-esque. Power pop, power rock. If you like Cheap Trick and stuff like that, it's interesting how a duo can not only take on the aesthetics of these eras and whatever. It's a very Sparks cover, by the way, but also sort of like make the sound of that era. If you play this record, you probably would not think it was recorded in 2024 or 23. It sounds like it was recorded in 1975 or, maybe earlier even, but it's a very, very good record. If the songwriting wasn't so great, it would just fall flat. But My Golden Years as an opener, great, great song. Church Bells, If You and I Are Not Wise, How Can I Love Her More? Oh my gosh, that song is just incredible. The second side, I think most of the songs are kind of rock on this record. There's only like one or two sort of ballady things. But when I say rock, I mean they're very pop rock, easygoing kind of stuff. If you were a child of the 70s and you liked all of that kind of like very like pop rock stuff, like not the heavy rock, but the tuneful rock, the catchy, sort of Badfinger-esque sounding stuff or what, late Beatles solo. You got to check this out. It's really good. And I think their vocals keep getting better too. And they usually self-produce everything. So, yeah. I can't remember their name right now, but like I said, I got a lot going on in my head but to try and keep together. All right. Number 6 for me for the year, Beth Gibbons. And her latest record, of course, it's like hard to read, Lives Outgrown. Beth is the lead singer of the band Portishead, who haven't had a record since 2007. Is that right? It's been like 16, 17 years. And this is technically her solo debut. She did have a solo record a few years ago where she was singing modern classical music. I don't think that one necessarily counts. And then she had the one she did with Rustin Man, the guy from Talk Talk, Paul Webb, and that was 2001. So that was kind of a solo record, really more of a duo, but she did all the singing. So this is her first like sort of on her own type record, but I think this was just a stunning record. If you're into like British folk rock of like the late 60s and early 70s. I mean, it's kind of dark. It's pretty soulful, but it's also very like stark. It kind of fits the Portishead ethos of, sort of that dark rock thing. I'm a huge Portishead fan. So take Portishead, take out the trip hop. Okay, it doesn't have beats, doesn't have samples necessarily, but it does have really great acoustic rock arrangements and her fragile voice throughout the whole thing, and sort of stunning. Pretty dark. The last song, Whispering Love, is sort of the redemptive, like, you gotta let a little light in here type song at the end. But a lot of it is just sort of like burden of life, loss changes. I believe her mother died or something right before this was made. So things like that can sometimes affect the tone of a record. So obviously. So number 6, Beth Gibbons, Lives Outgrown. Number 5, speaking of death, The Cure, Songs of a Lost World. Well, what can I say about this album that hasn't been said already? Songs about the death of his brother, songs about his father or other loved ones dying, sort of facing down the end of what The Cure has been and what it's going to be. This was the first album they released in like 15 years, Robert Smith. He kept promising it, and so it finally comes out, and it's only 8 tracks. Now, they're all pretty long, most of them. The last song is 10 minutes long, so it is like a 50-minute long album. He says he's got 2 others in the works that are almost near completion. I think it would be a wise choice for him to kind of do all three if he can. It might give us three sort of different facets or three different kind of ideas about where his mind has been for the last 15 years or so. But um, typical of Cure songs, some of these start and then Robert doesn't sing for 4 or 5 minutes. It's okay because it gives time for the band to play and you kind of get more into the mood of the song. One thing I wish that maybe the album had a little more of is like, I know this sounds weird, but reverb. I kind of love the 80s production of The Cure, especially the end of the 80s when things have this kind of chimey, boomy sort of sound to them. And their records have a little less of that now because the modern productions and all that. But I do think that the band does an excellent job here. Reeves Gabrels, who is Bowie's guitarist, slots in really well. And I don't know what my favorite song is here. I Can Never Say Goodbye, the song about the death of his brother, is just, that song is just so haunting. It was haunting live, and it's haunting here. War Song is pretty edgy and good. I think A Fragile Thing is the catchiest song on this record for me. Alone is beautiful. And then, of course, End Song, I think, is my favorite song on here. The last song. He's always threatening, like, this is the last song I'm going to sing. This is the end. And to call your song End Song, well, it does sort of imply, like, will there be any more? We really don't know. But I think the response has been so great. And this was a #1 record for them in the UK, top 5 in the US. I cannot see them just stopping right now, but I mean, you never know. But Songs of a Lost World, thank you for returning, Robert Smith. We needed you. All right, #4. Getting towards the top here. Vampire Weekend and their new album, Only God Was Above You. This really impressed me too, and I was not so much of. I love the first 3 Vampire Weekend records. I was not so much a fan of the last one, the first album they did for Columbia. It sounded a little too Simon and Garfunkel knockoff to me, and with the departure of Rostam, I was like, are they giving away too much of themselves, the quirkiness of it? And I think that they brought it back here. I really do. I think Ariel Reichstad produced this, did a great job. The last song is a 10-minute song. It might not need to be quite that long, but it's a good song. But I think the rest of the album really, really shines. Ezra, his writing is great, and the arrangements on this are incredible. If you really kind of dissect what the band is doing musically and how it's pieced together, it's pretty stunning, actually, musically speaking. And I love this record, and it's a kind of a breezy, summery record. And sometimes I have no idea what he's talking about necessarily. Again, but I don't really care because it's got such a light vibe to it, and I'm just so drawn into the musicality of it. And as a pianist, I hear some of the stuff that's going on, and I think, oh my gosh, like I don't know who put that together or who's playing this or that or whatever, but it's pretty stunning. So, and yeah, I'm so glad that they are back too. It took them 6 years to get that one out, 5 or 6 years. They're getting further and further between. So, okay, we're at my top 3 already. So here's a record that probably hardly anybody knows. And the reason that I'm putting this on here is because A, I'm a huge fan of this band. I always have been. And again, not a lot of people know who this is. And B, I think this is one of their best albums ever. And so this was something that came out first it was like only sold through the internet. Then it's been put out digital now, so it is out now. It will be out physical in America to buy in January, so don't worry, it's coming. But I have a kind of an early one because I bought it online. But Saint Etienne and their new album, The Night. Saint Etienne is a trio from the UK, London area. Bob Stanley is a very acclaimed writer. He's another person who wrote for magazines, music magazines. Pete Wiggs is sort of an instrumentalist, and Sarah Cracknell, who's the singer. Their last record, which came out like 4 years ago, was built on it was a very like kind of different record for them. They're usually very sort of pop rock with sort of a throwback to the 60s, and then once in a while they'll do like a modern kind of like upbeat dance or trance song, pop song. But the last record was like 8 songs that were all based on loops, drum loops that were slowed down and had weird kind of vocal samples over them. And it was just sort of a hypnotic type of record. Not catchy, kind of pastoral, but very kind of like lazy and calming, whatever. Well, this album is the same kind of vibe in a way, but I think it goes deeper than that. They sort of got rid of the idea of doing loops altogether, so it doesn't have really beats at all. You can't really find a drum on this record, but it's mostly acoustic based, and so it's a lot more kind of folky. You hear a lot of acoustic guitar, a lot of violins and strings, a lot of clarinets and flugelhorns and um, hammered dulcimers, and then lots of ambient, lots of like the sound of rain, the sound of birds, the sound of wind, things like that that go in and out of the songs. My favorite song on here, The Nightingale, is like that, also with tons and tons of reverb. Like there are times when there's no instrument playing and they've just put so much reverb on her voice, but it just sounds like it fills up the room. So it's kind of an exercise in ambience. And the thing that they were going for was the feeling that you get, this is sort of specific, at night when you have left the club or the show or whatever, and you're on your walk on the way home, and you're looking at the reflection of the water from rain or whatever in the street, and then you get home and you turn on a record or something and you just kind of chill and then go to sleep. And it's sort of like that after, like before sleep, but like late waking hours kind of vibe. So that's why it's called The Night. And it is very much an ambient sort of record, but it does have vocals. She sings a lot more on this record than the last one. There's nothing that I would call a hit single or a single. There are tunes, but there's no like, you're not going to hear this on the radio really. But it's just a very beautiful piece of art, stunning album. For me, just to kind of like mellow out a lot. I need mellowing out these days. And so this comes out, like I said, in January. And there's also a new pop record that they've promised coming out in the summer. So if you're not into that, wait around a few months and you'll get one that you can dance in your living room to, probably. Again, they really like the 60s too, so there's a lot of that kind of vibe. The swinging London, the dusty Springfield, like they're really into all that kind of stuff. So, all right, my number 2 had to happen. Pratt, Charlie XCX. You know, I heard this record without really any expectations, and I was a big fan of Charlie on the Pop 2 mixtape and that sort of era, the self-titled album. And then Crash, I thought, was a good record. It was much more pop mainstream, and I can see why a lot of her fans were not as into it. This one kind of goes back to the sort of glitchy pop experimentalism, hyper pop, that you go to Charlie for, because she's one of the few that does it and does it as well and is as good as brave doing it as she is. I mean, this is the kind of record you will not hear. I would be very shocked if Taylor Swift ever does a record that sounds like this. It's just very glitchy. It's catchy. There are times that the synth wig outs are just like overwhelming. It's all about the production, really. I mean, and if she didn't have such a like an artistry or a vision for it, it wouldn't work. And so it's kind of like a mix of her and her producers, really. But hard to say what my favorite song is. But I have to say, when I hear 365, the last track, sort of the remix track before the bonus songs, that song is just like mind blowing what happens in the production on that. If you have that loud in your car, you're going to blow your speakers probably, but it's great. All right. And I know I don't even want to talk about Brat Summer and all that stupid like political stuff at this point. Basically, I just think that it's an album that stands on its own because of its production and whatever. So, all right, my number one. It's my number one, people. So I'm just being like, all right, this is, and I'm doing, it's two records. It's the Smile Wall of Eyes and the Smile Cutouts. The reason that it's both of them is that they were recorded at the same time, and then the guys decided which were going to go where. This is like Radiohead with Kid A and Amnesiac again, and it's the same two guys that were responsible for that mainly, Johnny Greenwood and Tom York, and along with their drummer, Tom. So Wall of Eyes came out early in the year, and it was just a really cool atmospheric record. And people were shocked at how fast this came out after the last record that they put out just like a year and a half earlier. And it was a very kind of like smooth, somber album. And then you get to Bending Hectic, and it's like you just feel like your speakers and everything is warped, and it's the loudest Johnny Greenwood guitar solo we've heard since probably Paranoid Android or something. And then Cutouts came out later in the year, and I actually like it almost even better because I think that it's got more tunes to it. It sort of opens with very synthy stuff that's sort of like very kind of Tom York, almost solo kind of stuff. But then it gets into kind of Beatles-ish stuff on the second track with this kind of like I'm so tired type of vibe or something. And then there's all sorts of glitchy, really cool rhythmic stuff on this record too. And I love the last track. I think it's like one of those great sort of dark Radiohead type songs. I love these albums. Love. So people who are like, I don't know if I can get into the Smile or not. I'm like, it's basically Radiohead. You're just some of the rhythm section is different. It is slightly jazzier because of Tom being a jazz drummer, and he brings in that element. So, all right. So there you have my top 20 plus one. Now, again, this is going longer than I wanted it to. I just wanted to throw out some honorable mentions here because there were a lot of people that put out records this year that hadn't put out records in a long time, and I loved them, but there was not room for everything on the list. The new albums from from their first in 25 years, Fairground Attraction, their first in 35 years, Gavin Friday, his first in like 10 years. Let's see. I don't know how long it had been since David Gilmour, but that's a really good album. I'm much more impressed with that than I thought I would be. It's kind of mellow and sort of new age, but it's really well put together. Kim Deal, that was a totally unexpected. Like, I'm still getting into that one. That might have been on my list had it come out a little earlier. It's very interesting to hear her with like horns and strings and all that. It's like a Breeders album gone like sort of kaleidoscope or something. Kim Gordon, her solo record, very edgy, the trap beats with her kind of spoken word stuff. I thought that the Black Crowes had a really strong comeback record this year, very catchy. I liked the new Ride album, even though some people didn't because it wasn't shoegaze enough for them. I thought it was cool how they were trying new things. The Gossip, I liked that record. That was a big return for them after 10 years. Primal Scream, I liked that record. Empire of the Sun was a good return. That had been 8 years. And Bill Ryder Jones from the Coral. I liked his record a lot too. Very mellow. And Nika Costa, who's like a funk soul singer from like the 90s, her new record's like a total Prince album. It's just, if you like Prince circa like Dirty Mind and all that era, it's great. It's a really good funk soul album. A couple more here. The Noel Gallagher, I'm sorry, Liam Gallagher and Chris Squire. Liam from Oasis and Chris from Stone Roses. That was a really great poppy record, pop rock, very Oasis-y, and it sold pretty well. But I'm surprised that with all the big Oasis, stuff about the tour and all that, that album probably should have done better. And then the last one in that group, the Christopher Owens record, which I'm just also really getting into. That guy has been through so much since the last album came out. He was in a band called Girls and had made a couple of solo records that each one sort of like resonated with me a little bit less. And then apparently he was in some kind of like accident, then was also like engaged, and because he refused medical treatment because he didn't want to pay the bills, he ended up getting in such a problem with his partner that the engagement fell apart. He was living in like a camper for a while. That got stolen. It had his cat and his guitar in it. And then when he tried to like reunite with his old band member from Girls, then that guy died. So it's like he's been on a terrible roller coaster, and his new record is so good. It's very tuneful and like but very heartfelt too, and you can feel like sort of a spiritual reawakening in him of sorts. And it's not necessarily overtly religious. It's just a really, really good album. So I recommend Christopher Owens' record. I recommend MJ Lenderman's new record. That album has been all over the place lately, and the guy's a great singer-songwriter. He's a little like slackery sounding, but that's kind of why you like him, because he's a real everyman kind of guy. So check that out. Other ones that I really was impressed with this year, the new Sturgill Simpson, where he changed his name to Johnny Blue Skies. It's a great modern country rock record, good arrangements. It's a little short, but I really thought he did a very excellent album. And Adrienne Lenker's new album, I mean, the song at the beginning is about her family putting down the family dog, and it's just so gut wrenching. And it kind of like from there, it's like one sort of like very tender song after another. So she's definitely one to keep watching. A couple other big records of the year I think worth mentioning: Mannequin Pussy. That album has done very, very well. It's not necessarily for me. It's kind of in that category with like Amel, and that band. Both of them more if you're into like punk rock and stuff like that. But I thought, I can respect the talent there. And Jordy Greep, talk about talent. That guy from Black Midi. And I think the album is a little bit like a lot to take because there's so much of it, and it's so full on all the time. And he's playing this character who's really like, I think it's a character. If it's not a character, it's a problem, because it's like a person who's really not likable. It's a person who is definitely like a misogynist and whatever. So if you can get past that and think about like, this is just like art rock, and the guy's, he's playing like, this is like a definite character vibe. That is like a mind-blowing album. I don't know how that band keeps everything together when they are playing. It's like controlled chaos. Last things I'm going to mention, I got to mention Jack White. So the people that I wanted to sort of mention at the end are the ones that are so big that they're, I can't even really put them on a list, because I feel like they are so big culturally that they exist outside of what this list is for me. And Jack White is one of them. I thought No Name was his best solo record so far. I think it's the closest to the White Stripes that he's come. He sounds so engaged, plugged in. He's like, let's just make a raw rock record, throw it out there, and see what the public thinks. It was a very smart move. Was one of our biggest sellers of the year, but it was a really good album. If you like Zeppelin-esque kind of riffing, you gotta hear the Jack White No Name album. If you haven't, get out from under a rock and go listen to it because it's pretty shockingly good. Not shocking because Jack is great, but it's like that good. Wow, And so that would have probably been on my list, but I just couldn't find a way to put it. Sort of like the David Gilmour. I mean, like I really like these records, and I don't exactly know where to put them on a number scale. The last two I'm going to mention, one has to be the icon of Taylor Swift. I do think Tortured Poets Department was a great album. It was maybe a little too long, too many songs, but I can respect the writing, and I think she did a really great job with putting out sort of an artistic statement. The issue that she might have is some of the songs are a little bit samey. So I'd like to hear more variety in her arrangements next time. Whether that means getting away from Jack Antonoff or the Dessners a little bit more, I don't know. But I think overall that was a really great album, and she's so huge she doesn't care if I give her a good rating or not. So whatever. But Tortured Poets definitely deserves a mention. And the final mention I think has to go to Beyonce and Cowboy Carter, which, I'm sort of getting tired of the people saying, get out of country music, you don't belong there. In a lot of cases, like Billboard gave her awards. Well, Billboard gives awards based on sales. They don't give it on like, oh, we love this or whatever. So, and Beyonce has no control over how many people buy her record. That's her record label doing that. So that just means a lot of people bought it or streamed it or listened to it, whatever. I thought it was a brave move for her to do something like that. It wasn't like, it was very risky. And I got to give her credit for that because she could have just done a typical R&B soul record like she usually does. And, it would have gotten plaudits and it wouldn't ruffle any feathers. And this was like she got Willie and Dolly to speak on the record. She got a lot of collaborators on there, and it was a fun record, And then there were moments that were very touching, like her version of Blackbird even was quite beautiful, I thought. So, and some things got a little bit like changed. People were like, purists about Jolene, like don't change Jolene, and it's like, okay, well, it's just another take on it, and I think sometimes if you're going to do a cover song, do something different with it. Because if you do exactly the same, what's the point in doing it? So I'm not trying to be Beyonce's biggest defender, but I do think that Cowboy Carter was a great album. What I didn't really appreciate was the fact that on vinyl, they put it out and they left off a few tracks. And then a few months later, they put it out again with those other songs on it and put it in a bigger package and made it like $20 more than it was the first time. To me, that's like the record company playing cash grab, and that really was not so cool. But overall, great record, and it's unfortunate what's going on in the personal life right now, but I don't know. I don't really have too much to say about that. I'm just basically here for the music. So, all right, so that was a pretty big list. There were many more albums that were great this year that I did not mention at all. I probably had another 20 or 30 that I could have gone on with just my list that weren't even in that honorable mention group. So thanks for watching. I can't wait to see what your lists are. I'm sorry this was a long video. Trying to keep it short. Trying. Happy 2025, everybody. Peace. We got to make this work, right? Got to make it work. And enjoy the music. I'm sure there's going to be a ton of great music. Every year there's more music than I could even have predicted. So, and this was a good year. Every year is good anymore. All right. I can't remember when there has been a bad year in the last like 10. So, thanks for watching. Take care of yourselves. Enjoy the holidays. I'll see you around. And peace for a great 2025.